Today's video is sponsored by Artlist.
Hey guys, Flo from Off to Lens, and it's time for another cinematography breakdown. So normally I reserve this kind of videos for documentaries, but I thought because Elements of Iceland was a bit different than the traditional travel videos in terms of like the locations and the concept behind it, I thought it'd be interesting to do one. I've also had quite a lot of questions about the gear that I used and how some of the shots were captured. If you haven't watched the video, I'd suggest to do it now and come back to this later. And I've also made a video about the sound design of the video because it goes hand in hand with the actual project, so feel free to watch that as well. And of course, as always, don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this one, and let's get into it. So I was in Iceland for about 6 days, and my goal was to capture content in order to create a video using only SFX and music from Artlist. I wanted to focus on the elements and the landscapes of Iceland, so basically capture everything that would be enhanced by sound, such as lava, wind, water, ice, etc. In terms of gear, I shot most of the projects on a BMPCC 6K Pro and a DJI Mavic 2 Pro. Some shots were also done on the EOS R, the lava ones, just because the weather was crazy and I was completely drenched. In terms of lenses, I've used the 70-200 f4 IS, the 24-105 f4 IS, and a few shots were also done on the 16-35 f4 IS, all Canon. I usually take Canon lenses on trips just because they're weather sealed and I can use them for stills as well. I didn't bring a monitor or an extra battery pack or filters or anything like that. I shot everything with just the camera and the lens. I also relied on my tripod a lot more than I usually do. I usually prefer to shoot handheld, but because of the nature of the video and also Iceland being so windy, I use the tripod quite a lot. In terms of codecs and resolutions, I shot on the Pocket everything in 6K RAW Q5, and for the DJI, the drone and the EOS R, everything was shot in 4K log 24p. So now let's get into the cinematography. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the main locations and sequences of the video and talk about it in terms of composition, light, what happened on the day, the specifics of the location, the intention behind the shot, and go like this step by step. Okay, we're now in Da Vinci, and this is the first sequence in the first location, which is a volcano. Everything was shot on the drone. What I wanted to do here is focus on the lava and the crater. Filming there was a bit tricky just because obviously the location, it was very windy, but at the same time you have also lava and heat, which makes it very, very difficult to fly, just because you can't fly too low because of the heat, and also you have to be careful with the wind. There were also a lot of people flying at the same time. I actually did crash the drone, not the way that I thought I would. There was just a big gust of wind that just came on the right and blew the drone against a rock, and the drone ended up on its back, and I actually had to grab it with my hand and I cut myself pretty bad. That was fine. I managed to fly again and get those shots. My goal for this was to shoot top-down shots of lava flows and the crater if I could, just to get some interesting patterns. The problem with this as well is because the lava is so bright, I had to actually expose for the lava. So these bits, for example, here, that are the brightest. And I thought I would actually need filters, but I didn't. It was actually fine for this. And what I was trying to do as well is to always move back and forth. So for example, here there's always movement, just because obviously the crater doesn't move. So I was trying to find some interesting composition and movements, and I knew that with something like this, movement is always better. So what I was trying to do is to go back and forth, or go left and right, to go over, but never stop. And I think they're easier to edit as well. In terms of composition, obviously, like I said, top down works really well for this because you get those interesting patterns, but you have to fly long enough that you actually get some lava cracking and that kind of stuff. So I stayed about here an hour and a half, and I got as much as I could. This was about 2 batteries worth of flying, and I was really happy with it. This part here was actually very, very hard because this is extremely bright, and that's why everything here is dark. So this is not actually, it's dark, but it's not nighttime, but it really shows you how bright this is compared to this. So the second location is Vic. Everything here was shot on the Pocket 6K Pro with the 70-200 and the 24-105. This was on the beach. That was also my last day. I only had 10 minutes before I had to drive back to Reykjavik, about like 2.5 hours. So I had to make very quick decisions. I decided to shoot everything handheld in slow motion. I only had 10 minutes, so I think I captured about 6 or 7 shots and I used them all. I was leaning on rocks. I had no time for the tripod. Most of it was shot on a 24-105 because I could get wider shots, but also tighter ones without having to move too much. I wanted to get slow motion shots because I knew that it would work well with sound design, like ocean and the waves and the seagulls is something that that I knew could be very interesting. In terms of composition, I used those 2 rocks as a main focus. So that's what's one on the left, one on the right. And I tried to basically align the camera to have the rule of thirds. So for example, one part here and then 2 here. And I've tried to do this as much as I could, but always keep those rocks either in the center or put them left or right, just to have something interesting. And because they don't move, there's not a lot of options. For the waves, same again, I was trying to split this in 3 parts. So for this one here, obviously being at the ocean, I knew that I needed a shot of an actual proper wave crashing. So I had to wait here. Out of the 8 minutes, I'll probably spend most of my time waiting for this to happen. This was shot in 60p, and I was pretty happy with it. I got lucky as well that the day was actually overcast, so it gave this kind of grayish bluish tone to the water and made it look very, very wild, which would be great for me in terms of sound design, just because it looks angry and exactly like I wanted. Let's move on to the next one, which is Gulfoss. So Gulfoss, this is a very popular location. If you've been to Iceland, you've probably been there. It's a huge waterfall, so I had to go there again for sound design. I knew that a big waterfall like this, one that you can get close to, would work very well. Because my goal was to avoid people as much as possible, I had to kind of carry my gear back and forth around the waterfall just to get some shots. So my goal there was to capture wide shots of the actual waterfall to show how big it is, but also some tighter ones because, again, its sound design needs to be believable. I wanted to really focus on the water and not so much about the location itself. This is about the elements. So most of the shots that you see here are shot on the 70-200. There was another issue, that was the spray. A big waterfall like this, you have to be careful because there's a lot of spray coming out, like you can see here, and the cameras are not weather sealed, or at least the BMPCC is not. So I had to be mindful of that. I was trying to shoot everything backlit, the sun was probably around here on the right. So I really wanted to focus on that and to get those kind of bright, hazy highlights like this, which I think works pretty well. It was slightly overcast, but there was quite a bit of sun as well going through the clouds. I shot a lot on tripod just because I wanted to pan and tilt a lot. That's something that, like I said, I use a tripod a lot. So for example, this is a shot that I had in mind, a curtain shot. I don't know how else to describe it, but I wanted to really split the frame and have something show the water, how wide the waterfall is and how big the waterfall and heavy it looks. So that's probably one of the first shots that I tried to get. I think this was my second or third try. Pretty happy with the composition, same as here. So basically fill the frame with the waterfall as much as I could, and I think it really gives, when you compare a shot like this one to that one, for example, this is the exact same placement, but this is so much more impressive, and for sound design, this is a shot that I was really happy with. Let's go to the next one, which is, I'm gonna go a bit further along, the lava. Obviously, a lot of people are interested about the lava. So this was one of the most challenging parts of the whole my whole time there, just because the weather was horrible. It might not look like it on the footage here, but the fact that I had to use my EOS R because the weather was so bad really means something. It was raining, it was windy, it was cold, and the weather was so bad that they actually closed the path, like the hike, 2 hours after I left. I was very, very wet. My gear got absolutely drenched, all cameras, lenses. So what I had to do, I had to just put the 70-200 on the EOS R and just hide behind a rock. Basically every rock that you could see at that location had a cinematographer or a photographer hiding behind it. It was absolutely insane. It also didn't help that I had to drive 3 hours at 3 a.m. in order to be there, and then hike for a couple of hours with all the gear to get those shots. So in terms of the cinematography here, I wanted to obviously focus on the lava because that's something that is quite rare. The crater is always there, but the lava flowing like this was very rare. Something that I didn't anticipate was that everything gets blurry with the heat, especially on the 70 or 200mm lens like I was using. So you can see here that this is actually blurry. It looks like it's blurry, it's in focus, but all the heat that's generated from here was actually blurry. So my kind of like trick to do that was to find something in the foreground that would be blurry, and I would give the impression that this was in focus or sharper than it actually is. In terms of exposure, I was exposing for obviously the brighter part, just because lava is so hot that everything else like this falls into darkness, and I kind of like that because to me a volcano is something that's dramatic, and I didn't want to look a bit like happy. Not that it was like dark on the day, it was raining, but it was still bright. So I was really trying to focus on the lava and to expose for the brighter part, and I think the EOS R did a pretty decent job. Like obviously losing a bit of details here or there, but in terms of like dynamic range and like how well it handled the weather and the different like tones and textures, and I was actually pretty happy. What I was trying to do again was to fill the frame with lava, so I was quite far, as you can see on a shot like that. This was probably like 200 or 300 meters away. Same for this. I think the volcano was about 400 meters away. So I really wanted to fill the frame with as much lava shot as I could, just to give the impression that I was actually a lot closer than I was. Now let's go into the cliffs in Vic. This part was the windiest part, and it happened to also be the sunniest part of my whole trip. I shot everything on the 6K Pro at 200mm most of the time on a tripod. So because this was the only day that I got sunset, I tried to make the most out of it. It was very cold, very windy, so tripod was necessary. For these two sunset shots, which are some of my favorites, I think this one is probably I'd say my top favorite shot of the whole video in terms of like composition and the light. I wanted to have the sun in the middle, so for that one here and that one here, and I was shooting directly at it. I was using NDs, internal NDs on the Pro, and I just love how the clouds created those lines here, and I found this like very interesting, all those layers, and I was trying to wait for the right moment as well to be able to get those rays coming through, under and over the clouds. So I was really happy with this. It was hard to expose because I was definitely like just staring straight at the sun, so it was quite hot. I wasn't clipping, it looks like it, but I wasn't. I just waited for the right time. I also tried to split the frame when I could, whether it's like vertically or horizontally. So for example, here I was trying to get a line, I was trying to get another line coming here, trying to get something interesting because obviously I was stationary, I couldn't move, and when you're that far away the view doesn't really change much. Same for here as well, like I was saying, creating layers, trying to highlight those silhouettes here, and yeah, just focus on that, and again fill the frame, have that compression effect, that works really well. Okay, next sequence is Gulfoss. So this is one of my favorite locations in the whole world, I would say. I spent hours during my first visit there a few years ago, but last time I went there it was very, very moody, and this time it was extremely sunny. I think I used like ND like 2 and 4 It was very, very sunny, probably the best weather I've had for the whole trip, in terms of like there was no wind, it was warm, it was really beautiful, but it was also quite challenging to shoot. Again, this is shot on the tripod because I wanted to pan and tilt very smoothly for all the shots, or at least have, like this frame for example, something very stable and very controlled, same as Gulfoss. There was a lot of spray. I'll show you a photo when I went a bit closer to take some stills. This spray here that you see is insane. You actually get soaked if you're just about like 60 or 70 meters away from it. So every time I was getting a shot, I was pointing the camera down. After that, straight away, I had cloth with me just to wipe the lenses, but yeah, the camera was quite wet. I exposed for the water because the sun is basically just behind us here and hitting the waterfall like here straight on, which made it quite challenging to get an image that where you would retain details in the shadows as well as the highlight. I also wanted to retain that hazy, brighter feel that you can see here. It's almost like I don't know, like just hazy, grainy, kind of washed out, and I think it works really well for this location. What I also tried to do for the composition was always to find interesting angles. Obviously the subject doesn't change, so I was shooting a lot of different angles to make it interesting. So for example, this one, pretty obvious, split the frame right in half. Some other shots just before here, so obviously panning left to right. Here again, splitting the frame and waiting for a few like birds to cross the frame. This one here, again, splitting the frame not in half, but like just have like this 1/3 here, and that's what I've done for the whole for the whole sequence. This was quite hard to shoot like any wide shots, and that's why you don't see front on wide. You see it here, but I'm cutting the bottom just because I was trying to avoid people. Like, again, the goal of this video was to capture Iceland and the elements and not have any human interaction. This really shows you how bright it was on the day compared to this part. I was trying my best to expose everything correctly, but that was quite tricky because normally I would not shoot at that time of the day, especially on a waterfall that is that big and bright, but I didn't have a choice. I was there for about 40 minutes and that was it. Oh yeah, also I also got lucky with the rainbow here, which added a bit of colors. If you've been to Iceland, you know that getting weather like this is quite rare, so I had to make the most out of it and actually got back. I went back to the car, saw this rainbow here, and I was like, I need to go back and shoot just a few more shots. So yeah, I rarely had more than 40 or 45 minutes per location, sometimes only 10 or 15 like Vic. And now a quick word about today's sponsor, Artlist. Obviously this whole project is made possible and sponsored by Artlist, but if you don't know who they are, it's basically a website where you can get SFX and music for your projects. I use them all the time on YouTube videos and documentaries, and you can also use them on commercial work, which is great. And now that I've got a great selection of SFX, it's a pretty good package for anyone trying to get into filmmaking or YouTube or anyone established. So if you're thinking of getting it, be sure to check out the link in the description so you get an extra 2 months on a subscription if you subscribe now. So now back into DaVinci. So what I want to do is to touch a bit on a few drone shots. And that was the first time that I actually brought my drone to Iceland. That was one of the main reasons to go back there to film. And what I wanted to try to do with the drone footage is to have a minimalist approach to the way I was capturing those landscapes. So I treated my drone shots almost like abstract painting, focusing on patterns and shapes, and composition was key. So I was always trying to find some interesting frames, and every time I was trying to capture a road, like this shot for example, I had to wait for the cars to go, and they're quite long roads, so I had to wait a very long time. But like I said, I just didn't want any human interactions when possible. So all my shots here are quite minimalist, with a slight movement as well. And yeah, I was pretty happy with it. I think the video wouldn't be the same without the drone footage. I always see drone footage as a great way to link two scenes or to break up footage in terms of like, or to break up the edits in terms of pace and energy. And the Mavic 2 Pro did actually pretty well with it, considering the time of day that I was filming and how bright the highlights were. This is one of my favorite shots, I think, in the whole video as well. I just love the line here, and that's what I was trying to do, find cool compositions or unusual compositions. Obviously Iceland is a very well documented place, but I was trying to have my touch on it and to create something that was a bit more quiet and more abstract. Like I said, for example, like here, this is actually the part of the volcano that was cold, lava that had gotten cold over the past few weeks. I was really happy with these shots. And yeah, it's trying to find again some interesting shape here with the shadows, and like obviously drone doesn't have the same dynamic range or the same capabilities of the Pocket, for example, but it just makes for very cool footage and just adds that bit of movement that I think is necessary for this kind of video. Now we're getting into the volcano at night. This was shot on the 6K, mainly with some drone shots that were also shown at the start of the video. This was very tricky to do because the lava and the craters were very, very bright. As it got darker, you get a lot of contrast, and so basically everything else falls out into darkness except for that bit in the middle here. So I was exposing for that. The problem is that I couldn't actually see anything, especially when I was flying with the drone at times. I could not see anything at all. Like on this shot, for example, all the detail around here, like around that, basically is lost, and it was very hard to see where I was. But obviously I had something super bright to focus on. But yeah, this was very, very stressful to capture, because obviously you have to fly high above, but the heat generated from that is insane. And we've heard stories about people burning their drones, so obviously I was fully prepared to have mine completely like crash. I shot everything at pretty high ISO. I think on a drone I was about at 800 and sometimes like 1600 ISO, which is like close to the max. I did not use noise reduction, I think just because it falls into darkness quite harshly. That was fine. The Pocket, I was shooting at about 2500 to 3200 ISO. I didn't see a lot of noise, as you can see on these shots here. I did not have a tripod, but the weather at least was better this time, so I didn't have to fight the wind. As always, I tried to get some wider shots and some closer shots. Here I only had about an hour and a half at the top, since I was flying back in the morning, just a few hours at 7 a.m. just after that on the same night. What I really enjoyed as well, like shooting at the volcano, I love the color of the lava against the sky and against the actual like cold part of the lava, which makes for really cool like color contrast. You've got the dark blues against the red and the bright of the lava. This location is actually a lot harder to capture than I thought it would be, just because everything looks the same. There's only one crater and one lava field, at least when I went there, so everything looks similar, and you're kind of like limited in terms of like interesting shapes and composition. So that's why I ended up doing shots like, for example, like this one, because I was like, oh, I'm going to try to be a bit creative and to find something, and yeah, to just kind of like adjust for the location. Again, I was exposing for all the lava. Obviously you can see the difference in dynamic range, for example, between the drone shots. Like here you can see this is kind of like a bit hot, and the Blackmagic here that just handles it a lot more, obviously. Here it's a very good example of what I was talking about earlier, when you can actually see how hot this is and how hard it is to focus on that. So again, my goal was to create something interesting, so composition, here trying to get like rule of third, or like do like 1/4, 3/4. Same for here as well, get a static shot, but kind of trying to do as well to separate the frame, cut it in half or in thirds, and to have the smoke fill that corner here. Basically have line like this, like separate the frames and have something interesting as much as I could with the location. But yeah, I was really pleased with that. I was trying to also put the lava again in the center, as always, like I was talking about, to really draw the viewer in and just to have that sound design just elevate the whole sequence. I did try to get some, you can see it just right here, this was at 200 mil, tried to get a bit of like lava kind of like flying here a little bit. It was quite hard at 200 mil on my knees. Had the lens resting on my knees or resting on a rock to make sure that I wasn't shaking too much, and I think I did an okay job with a 6K here being handheld. holding 2 cameras as well. I was actually swapping cameras between lenses between the EOS R that I had on me and the 6K, so I don't think I would have been as quick if I had only one body. It was easy to change the two lenses between the bodies. The rest of the video is made of like similar shots. If I had to summarize this trip, I would say that it was quite rushed and straight to the point. I had to shoot on instinct more than ever because I was always rushing and thinking that the weather would turn and I didn't have time, and I was there by myself, so I had to drive a lot to make sure that I was there for certain locations at certain times. To give you an example, I had never swapped the battery, the internal battery on the 6K Pro. I always shot each individual sequence that you see, whether it's like the volcano, Gulfoss, Kvernufoss, any waterfall, the ocean, everything was always shot on just one battery. I never swapped for the whole trip. Obviously, it helped a lot that I had been to Iceland before. I knew what was worth it in terms of what I needed. I had to rush quite a lot, but I think in the end, sometimes it's how your first instinct and your first impression of a place is usually like the good one, and how you're going to capture it is always going to work out. Usually, at least for me, on the first few shots, they're usually the ones that I keep. I think that's it for me today, guys. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Don't hesitate to reach out to me on Instagram or YouTube if you've got any more questions about the actual video, the way it was shot, or the gear that I used. And again, don't forget to use the link in the description to get an extra 2 months when you subscribe to Artlist for their SFX or their music. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.